Why do you need a clear conscience? Why do you need to be at peace with it? Is your conscience clear? Or is there something in the back of your mind that's been gnawing at you for a while? Let's think about your conscience for a few minutes. What is your conscience? Your conscience is a personal awareness of what's right or wrong to you. It's your moral compass. We speak of your red lines sometimes. A red line is the point beyond which you won't go. There are some things that you will do, and there are some things that you won't. And your red lines are the boundaries between them. It's important to recognize that what you think is right or wrong is both objective and subjective. It's objective in that you have an inherent, a built-in sense of what is true, of what is right. It could be that you'd like that natural sense to be false, but regardless, it tells you that it's true all the time. And that's why when you violate it, you experience guilt. Guilt comes from knowingly doing what you know to be wrong. Your sense of what's right or wrong is also subjective, and that's because of two things. One is your environment, how you were brought up, where you live now, the social mores. The other is the opinions of those you respect, such as friends and family, and the things that you watch, listen to, or read. And together, your internal and external sense of what's right or wrong guides your moral compass. The internal one you're born with. The external one develops in the context of life, and to a greater or lesser extent, it's possible for the external one to influence the internal one. You'll notice that's happening, or has happened, when your red lines change, when you realize that things that you never would have done are now acceptable to you. How does that happen? The first time you do something that you know you probably shouldn't do, you'll feel a twinge of guilt. The guilt may be big or little, depends on how strongly you felt that what you did was wrong. As a kid, for example, I remember my parents telling me not to cross a particularly busy road, and doing it just that one time was enough to keep me from ever doing it again. No doubt their prohibition was to protect my safety, but I remember that when I got to the other side, I didn't feel safe. And that's because I had not only knowingly violated their will, I'd also left familiar surroundings. So you experience guilt when you do something that violates your conscience. The next time you do it, however, you may still feel guilty, but less so. And the time after that, even less. If you keep repeating that behavior, then eventually you'll desensitize your conscience. You won't feel guilty or as guilty. You'll change your beliefs about what's right and what's wrong. You'll decide that's not wrong after all, and you may even become an advocate for doing something that you once opposed. But what goes on inside of you is something different. Emotionally, you still have to deal with the inherent sense of what is right or wrong. And that's because the subjective does not negate the objective. In other words, you may salve your conscience so you no longer feel guilty, but that doesn't mean that the effects of the guilt will go away. In other words, you can fool your conscience, but not your subconscious. What happens instead is that you internalize it. You harbor it inside. In effect, you hide it. You try to hide it from others, and more importantly, you try to hide it from yourself. Psychologists will tell you that if you don't admit that you have a problem, then you can't solve it. Alcoholics, for instance, will never break their addiction until they admit that they have a problem. As long as they think that everything is under control, whether it is or not, they'll remain addicted. When you try to hide or mask the guilt that you feel, instead of dealing with the thing that caused it, you're really trying to persuade yourself that it doesn't exist. In Shakespeare's play, Hamlet, there's the famous line, "The lady doth protesteth too much." This comment is made in response to a character who expresses an insincere overreaction to something. In other words, they know they're guilty even though and even as they protest that they're not. And the same thing happens when you try to suppress the guilt that you feel for violating one of your red lines. You try to tell your conscious self that it doesn't matter, all the while your subconscious reminds you that it does. When you fail to acknowledge that you've crossed a red line, or what was formerly a red line, you try to suppress the guilt that you feel. And when you do that, it makes it much more difficult to fix that damage that transgression to your moral compass has caused. This is why making the conscious effort to give and obtain forgiveness, whether it's from God or someone you offended or even yourself, is so important. It's because until you clear the guilt, until you reconcile that relationship, whether it's between you and someone else or you and your conscience, the effects of that guilt will remain. You'll feel it inside of you. Some people numb their feelings with alcohol or drugs, or try to keep themselves so busy that they forget about it, but they can't make it go away by avoiding the issue. Guilt is one of the most destructive emotions that you can experience. It's vital to you as a solopreneur to maintain a clear conscience because you already have enough things to think about without constantly being reminded that you did something that violated it, gnawing away in the back of your mind. That constant gnawing will interfere with your ability to think, to concentrate, or to focus on whatever it is you're trying to do. In other words, it will make your work harder. It will make it harder unnecessarily. It will be what in sports is called an unforced error. It'll be an error that you make deliberately. Therefore, you must do all you can to maintain a clear conscience, because in so doing, you'll be able to focus on the things that you want to focus on. Your mind won't be distracted by that thing that you did, and you won't have that constant subconscious reminder of incongruency with your moral compass. Peace of mind and heart will do more for you than you can ever imagine. I hope that you found this video to be helpful. If you did, then please like it, leave a comment below, and subscribe to my channel for more psych hacks. I'm Dr. Bruce Hoag.